Most people know one name when it comes to prehistoric predators: Tyrannosaurus rex, the king, the last word in land hunters, the animal that ends the conversation. But T Rex arrived late. By the time it appeared about 68 million years ago in what is now North America, another predator had already risen, dominated, and vanished on a different continent 30 million years earlier. Its name is Giganotosaurus. It was longer than T Rex, up to 43 feet, built not for crushing bone, but for something else entirely: a skull nearly 5.5 feet long, teeth shaped like blades, built for slicing through flesh rather than grinding through bone. A different design, a different logic, a different answer to the same question every large predator has to solve. How do you bring down something that dwarfs you? Because the prey Giganotosaurus hunted were not just large, they were likely the biggest land animals that have ever existed. The long-necked titanosaur sauropods that move through South America like living mountains. T-Rex never faced anything like that. And yet, almost nobody talks about Giganotosaurus. Its fossils weren't even found until 1993, discovered by an amateur enthusiast in the Patagonian desert, and the skeleton was nearly 70% complete, sitting there undiscovered for nearly 100 million years. Tonight, we go back to the world it ruled and ask why evolution built something this extraordinary 30 million years before the animal that gets all the credit. If prehistoric stories like this are why you're here, a like and a subscribe genuinely help keep them going. Now get comfortable. We're going back to meet the first king before T Rex. Names often arrive long after the living presence has vanished, shaped not by the animal itself, but by those who uncover its traces. In this case, the name carries a quiet weight, drawn from fragments of language that attempt to match something immense. Giganotosaurus, the giant southern lizard, a title formed from Greek and Latin roots, given to a creature that once moved across a landscape far removed from where such words would ever be spoken. Its story resurfaced in the 1990s when weathered bones emerged from the dry soils of Patagonia in what is now Argentina. The discovery did not come from a long established expedition, but from a watchful eye that noticed something unusual embedded in stone. What followed was a careful unearthing, revealing a skeleton that was remarkably complete, enough to suggest the outline of an animal that had not been seen for nearly 100 million years. Piece by piece, its form returned, not in flesh, but in proportion and structure. In length, it stretched farther than the more familiar predator that would appear millions of years later. Estimates place it at around 40 feet from snout to tail, a body built along a different balance of mass and motion. Where T Rex carried a heavier frame, Giganotosaurus seems to have distributed its weight more lightly across its length, creating a profile that suggests a different approach to movement and interaction with its environment. The distinction is not simply one of size, but of design, each adapted to the pressures of its own time and place. It belongs to a group known as the Carcharodontosaurids, a lineage of large theropods whose name reflects a resemblance in their teeth to those of sharks. Within this family are other giants, such as Carcharodontosaurus in Africa and Maposaurus, another inhabitant of South America. These animals share certain traits: long skulls, serrated teeth, and bodies that hint at speed, paired with cutting precision. They form a branch of predatory dinosaurs, separate from the tyrannosaurs, yet shaped by similar ecological roles. The comparison to T Rex arises almost naturally, not because they lived side by side, but because they occupy similar positions in the imagination. Both stand at the peak of their respective ecosystems, both represent the largest carnivores of their time, and both embody the idea of dominance in a prehistoric world. Yet their similarities are more about role than relation. Evolution followed different paths to reach these towering forms, arriving at two distinct answers to the same enduring challenge. Giganotosaurus, with its elongated skull and lighter build, reflects a lineage that favored slicing over crushing, reach over force. Its proportions suggest an animal that interacted with its surroundings in a way that diverged from the heavier, more compact form of Tyrannosaurus. The contrast between them is not a matter of superiority, but of specialization, each shaped by the demands of the prey they encountered and the landscapes they moved through. Seen in this light, Giganotosaurus is not simply an earlier version of a more famous predator, but a separate expression of what a large carnivore could become. Its identity rests in its own time, its own continent, and its own evolutionary story, one that unfolds quietly beneath layers of stone until chance and patience bring it back into view. Before any movement could be understood, the land itself set the conditions for how a body like Giganotosaurus would exist. Its world was not a backdrop, but an active force, shaping every step, every hunt, every quiet pause within its range. During the mid Cretaceous, South America offered a landscape that favored breadth and continuity, a place where distance mattered as much as strength. Warmth settled across the entire planet, not in sharp waves, but as a constant presence that softened extremes. Without polar ice to regulate temperature, climates blended into one another, creating long stretches of habitable terrain. For a predator built to travel, this meant fewer natural barriers, fewer interruptions in the search for prey. The body of Giganotosaurus, long and balanced, fit into this openness, able to move across wide areas without the constraints that colder or more fragmented environments might impose. Water traced the land in slow, shifting lines. Rivers expanded and divided, their courses rarely fixed, reshaping the ground over time. Floodplains formed where these waters spread outward, leaving behind layers of sediment that remained soft beneath the surface. When something as large as Giganotosaurus moved across these plains, the ground would yield slightly under its weight, each step absorbed rather than resisted. This kind of terrain favored steady motion, a measured pace that conserved energy while covering distance. Vegetation grew in response to this constant exchange between land and water. Forests gathered along river edges, dense and humid, offering moments of cover where sight lines narrowed and sound softened. Beyond them, open expanses stretched outward, filled with low plants that moved gently under the weight of passing bodies. Giganotosaurus would have moved between these zones, not confined to one, but using both, slipping from shadow into open ground, depending on the rhythms of the environment. The atmosphere itself carried a richness that sustained this growth. Higher levels of carbon dioxide supported dense plant life, which in turn fed the immense herbivores that shared this landscape. These conditions allowed ecosystems to stabilize around abundance rather than scarcity. For a large predator, this meant that survival was tied not to constant struggle, but to understanding patterns, where herds gathered, how they moved, and how the land guided them. South America, already separated from other land masses, developed its own ecological character. Isolation did not mean emptiness, but distinction. The animals that lived here, including Giganotosaurus, followed evolutionary paths shaped by this separation. The absence of certain competitors and the presence of others created a balance unique to this continent. Within that balance, Giganotosaurus occupied a role defined not only by its size, but by how well it matched the scale and structure of its surroundings. Even the sky played its part, with winds that carried warmth and moisture across great distances, ensuring that no region remained entirely dry or barren. This continuity of climate reduced extremes, allowing life to persist across vast areas without the interruptions that come from sudden shifts in temperature or resource availability. In such a world, Giganotosaurus was not an isolated figure moving through a static scene. It was part of a system that extended far beyond its immediate presence, shaped by rivers that wandered, forests that expanded, and a climate that held everything in a steady, quiet balance. Size, in this age, was not an exception but a pattern that repeated across the living world. Bodies expanded beyond what later landscapes would sustain, stretching into forms that altered the very structure of their surroundings. Among these, the immense presence of Argentinosaurus moved slowly across the land, its length and mass carried with a steadiness that reshaped whatever lay beneath its path. Creatures of this scale did not exist in isolation. They formed the foundation of entire ecosystems, their feeding habits influencing the growth of vegetation, their movement carving subtle pathways into the terrain. When Argentinosaurus reached into the canopy or swept across lower growth, it redistributed energy through the environment, opening space for new plants to emerge while sustaining its own immense body. The landscape responded in kind, adjusting to the constant presence of animals whose needs were measured in vast quantities of plant matter. For Giganotosaurus, this abundance defined its existence. It was not simply a predator moving through a populated world, but one shaped by prey that far exceeded its own size. The presence of such massive herbivores created a system where survival did not depend on small, frequent hunts, but on interactions that carried greater consequence. A single successful engagement could provide sustenance for an extended period, while failure meant expending energy across distances that demanded efficiency and restraint. The relationship between predator and prey unfolded on a scale that feels distant from later ages. Argentinosaurus and other large herbivores were not easily brought down, their size offering both protection and challenge. Giganotosaurus, though formidable, existed within this balance rather than above it. Its design suggests adaptation to these conditions, a body capable of navigating encounters where persistence and precision mattered more than overwhelming force alone. Across this environment, multiple herbivores of significant size contributed to a layered ecosystem. Some fed closer to the ground, shaping the undergrowth, while others reached higher, creating a vertical distribution of resources. This stratification allowed different species to coexist, each occupying a specific range within the same landscape. For a predator, this meant that opportunities varied, not only in size but in accessibility, requiring an awareness of patterns that extended beyond simple pursuit. The evolution of large predators alongside these herbivores reflects a quiet continuity. As plant life flourished under warm, stable conditions, herbivores expanded in response, their bodies growing to process the abundance available to them. In turn, predators adapted to match this expansion, not by mirroring size alone, but by developing strategies suited to engaging with such formidable prey. Giganotosaurus stands within this progression, shaped by the same forces that allowed Argentinosaurus to exist. There is a sense of proportion in this world, where each element finds its place within a broader structure. Nothing appears excessive when viewed within its context. The immense bodies of herbivores support the existence of equally capable predators, and together they form a system that sustains itself through balance rather than excess. Movement, feeding, and survival all operate within this shared scale, creating a rhythm that remains consistent across time. In this age of giants, Giganotosaurus is not defined solely by its own size, but by the magnitude of the world it inhabits. Its presence is inseparable from the vast herbivores that move alongside it, each shaping the other in ways that continue to echo through the record left behind. There is a certain quiet precision in how its body comes together, as if each part has been arranged to serve motion rather than spectacle. Giganotosaurus does not present itself as a single, overwhelming mass, but as a flowing structure, one that guides movement forward with minimal resistance. Its outline stretches across space in a way that feels deliberate, each proportion contributing to a balance that remains steady even as it moves. The head extends outward in a long, narrow form, creating a silhouette that differs from the deeper, more compact skull seen in Tyrannosaurus rex. This length allows the jaws to reach farther, covering more distance without requiring the entire body to follow immediately. The bones within the skull are shaped with openings that reduce weight while maintaining strength, a pattern common among large theropods. Yet here, it contributes to a sense of lightness at the very front of the body. This reduction in mass allows the neck to support the head with less strain, enabling controlled and efficient movement. That sense of efficiency continues through the torso. Rather than concentrating weight into a dense core, Giganotosaurus distributes its mass along its length. The body appears relatively streamlined for its size, suggesting an arrangement where strength is present but not excessive. Muscles lie along the frame in a way that supports sustained motion, particularly around the hips and upper legs, where the force for forward movement is generated. These areas carry the power needed to propel such a large animal, yet they do so without disrupting the overall balance. The hind limbs anchor this system, long and proportioned for stride, rather than sheer force alone. Each step would have extended the body forward with measured efficiency, conserving energy across distance. The joints align in a way that supports both stability and flexibility, allowing the animal to adjust its pace without losing control. This creates a balance between speed and strength, where neither quality dominates entirely, but both remain available as needed. Along the spine, the body forms a continuous axis that connects each movement into a unified whole. Subtle shifts in posture would have adjusted the center of gravity, keeping the animal stable as it moved across varied terrain. The distribution of muscle along this axis allows energy to transfer smoothly from one region to another, reducing unnecessary effort and maintaining coordination. This integration suggests a body designed not for isolated bursts, but for sustained, controlled motion. Extending behind, the tail completes this structure as a counterbalance. Its length mirrors the forward reach of the skull, creating an equilibrium that stabilizes the entire body. As Giganotosaurus moved, the tail would have adjusted constantly, making fine corrections to maintain alignment. It acts not as an afterthought, but as an essential component, ensuring that the forward mass does not disrupt the animal's stability. Taken together, these features form a body that reflects careful adaptation. The long skull, the lighter distribution of weight, the placement of muscle, and the extended tail all contribute to a design that favors coordination and reach. Giganotosaurus moves not as a collection of separate parts, but as a single, continuous system. Its structure shaped by the quiet demands of balance, motion, and the world it inhabits. The first impression comes not from the size of the jaws, but from the edges they carry. Along the length of Giganotosaurus's mouth, the teeth rise in a repeating pattern, each one shaped less like a spike and more like a narrow blade. Their surfaces are not smooth. Fine serrations run along the margins, small ridges that catch and guide as they pass through flesh, leaving clean, efficient cuts rather than blunt fractures. These serrations resemble those found in certain sharks, where the tooth does not rely on pressure alone, but on movement. As the jaw closes and pulls back, each ridge contributes to the separation of tissue, reducing the need for overwhelming force. In Giganotosaurus, this design suggests a method of feeding that depends on precision and repetition rather than a single decisive bite. The teeth are not built to withstand the stress of crushing dense bone, but to maintain sharpness along edges that engage softer material. This difference becomes clearer when placed beside the structure seen in Tyrannosaurus rex. There, the teeth are thicker, more rounded in cross section, designed to endure immense pressure. They penetrate deeply and hold, allowing the jaws to exert force that can fracture bone and collapse structure. In contrast, the teeth of Giganotosaurus appear more delicate, though still strong within their purpose. Their shape indicates a different interaction with prey, one that avoids the need to break through the hardest parts of the skeleton. Slicing and crushing represent two distinct approaches to the same goal. In a slicing system, the emphasis lies in creating openings, weakening tissue through repeated contact. Each pass of the teeth removes material, gradually reducing resistance. This method relies on movement, on the ability to engage, withdraw, and return with controlled timing. It suggests a rhythm to feeding, where damage accumulates rather than occurs all at once. Within this framework, the feeding behavior of Giganotosaurus begins to take form. The jaws, combined with the blade-like teeth, would have been suited to delivering cuts that opened large sections of flesh. Rather than holding on to prey with a single sustained grip, it may have relied on a series of bites, each one placed with intent. The serrations would have increased the efficiency of these actions, ensuring that each movement produced a measurable effect. This approach aligns with the structure of the skull and neck, which appear arranged for reach and motion rather than static force. The teeth become an extension of that design, tools that function best when paired with movement. They do not resist the limitations of their form, but operate within them, turning precision into advantage. Over time, such feeding would leave distinct marks on bone, shallow grooves, and parallel lines where the serrations passed across the surface. These traces, preserved in the fossil record, offer quiet evidence of how the teeth were used, revealing patterns that match the structure itself. In this way, the teeth of Giganotosaurus reflect a consistent design philosophy. They are not meant to dominate through pressure alone, but to interact with the body of its prey through controlled, repeated action. Each edge, each ridge, contributes to a process that unfolds gradually, shaping the outcome through precision rather than force. Pressure can shape outcomes in different ways, and in the quiet mechanics of a bite, those differences become clear. The jaws of Giganotosaurus do not close with the same overwhelming force associated with Tyrannosaurus rex. Instead, they operate within a range that favors control and repetition, where each movement contributes to a larger sequence rather than ending it. In Tyrannosaurus rex, the structure of the skull and the depth of its teeth support an approach centered on force. The jaws are built to deliver a crushing bite, one that can penetrate deeply and withstand the resistance of bone. When it closes its mouth, the action is decisive, compressing and breaking with a level of pressure that few other land predators have matched. This creates a feeding style where a single, well-placed bite can alter the condition of prey immediately, reducing the need for repeated engagement. Giganotosaurus follows a different path. Its bite force, while still substantial, appears lower in comparison, reflecting a design that does not rely on compression alone. The skull, lighter and more elongated, does not support the same degree of stress required for bone crushing. Instead, it allows for quicker, more fluid movements of the head and neck. The jaws open and close with precision, guiding the teeth into contact and then withdrawing, ready to repeat the motion. This distinction between crushing and slicing shapes how each animal interacts with its prey. A crushing bite aims to dominate in a single moment, applying enough force to disable or significantly weaken. A slicing bite works through accumulation, each contact creating damage that builds over time. In Giganotosaurus, the act of biting becomes part of a sequence, not an endpoint. The jaws engage, release, and return, each movement carefully placed to increase effectiveness without overextending energy. Such a pattern suggests a hunting behavior that emphasizes timing and persistence. Rather than relying on a single decisive strike, Giganotosaurus likely engaged in a series of controlled interactions, each one contributing to the gradual weakening of its target. The body supports this approach, allowing for repeated motions without losing balance or coordination. The head moves with the body, the neck guiding each bite with measured accuracy. This method aligns with the broader structure already present, where reach and movement play central roles. The bite is not isolated from the rest of the animal, but integrated into a system that values continuity. Each action flows into the next, maintaining a rhythm that allows the predator to remain effective over time. Energy is conserved through precision, avoiding the need for excessive force when repeated effort can achieve the same result. In this way, bite force and bite style become expressions of deeper differences in design. Tyrannosaurus rex channels its strength into singular moments of impact, while Giganotosaurus distributes its effort across multiple actions. Neither approach exists in isolation from the body that supports it. Each reflects a balance between structure, function, and the demands of the environment. Through this contrast, the nature of Giganotosaurus becomes clearer. It is not defined by what it lacks, but by how it uses what it has. Its bite, though less forceful in absolute terms, operates within a system that turns repetition into advantage, shaping its interactions with the world through a steady, deliberate rhythm. Not every hunt begins with motion. Sometimes it begins with stillness, a presence held just beyond the edge of notice. Giganotosaurus, shaped by length and balance, would not have relied on a single approach, but on a range of possibilities guided by the land and the behavior of those it followed. Its form suggests a predator capable of both waiting and moving, adjusting its method to match the moment rather than forcing one pattern onto every encounter. In areas where visibility narrowed, where vegetation gathered, and the ground softened under layered growth, an ambush would have taken form through patience. The body remains low, aligned with the contours of the terrain, minimizing disruption. Muscles hold tension without movement, conserving energy while attention narrows toward a single direction. When prey drifts within reach, the initial motion is controlled rather than explosive, a forward extension that closes distance without immediate strain. The first contact, shaped by reach and precision, begins the sequence rather than ending it. Beyond these enclosed spaces, the landscape opens, offering longer lines of sight and fewer places to remain concealed. Here, pursuit becomes possible, though not in the sense of sustained speed over great distances. The structure of Giganotosaurus suggests bursts of movement guided by timing rather than endurance alone. It would have followed the patterns of its environment, positioning itself where movement of prey naturally slowed or shifted, using the terrain to reduce the need for extended chase. Timing becomes the central element in either approach, whether emerging from stillness or advancing across open ground. the moment of engagement is chosen with care. A predator of this scale cannot afford repeated failures without cost, so each attempt must align with opportunity. The body supports this through coordination, allowing it to move when needed and remain still when motion would break the advantage. The prey it targeted adds another layer to this behavior. Large herbivores do not respond quickly to sudden change, but they do not fall easily either. Their size offers protection, their movement creating subtle disturbances that signal awareness. Giganotosaurus would have needed to read these signals, adjusting its approach to avoid direct confrontation with the most stable parts of the body. Instead, attacks may have focused on areas where movement creates vulnerability, regions that can be reached without encountering the full resistance of the animal. From this, patterns begin to emerge. An approach that avoids unnecessary struggle, a series of engagements rather than a single decisive action. The predator closes in, delivers a controlled strike, then withdraws just enough to reposition. Each movement contributes to a gradual shift in the condition of the prey, reducing its ability to respond effectively over time. This method aligns with the structure already present, where repetition and precision replace the need for overwhelming force. Such behavior does not require constant speed, but rather an understanding of when speed matters. Short bursts, guided by positioning, become more valuable than prolonged pursuit. The environment itself assists in this, shaping the flow of movement and creating moments where advantage can be gained without excess effort. Within this quiet interplay, Giganotosaurus moves as part of a larger system, its actions guided by the rhythms of the land and the behavior of those it hunts. It does not impose a single strategy, but adapts, shifting between stillness and motion, between waiting and advancing, allowing each hunt to unfold according to the conditions that surround it. Movement, at this scale, is never hurried in the way smaller bodies allow. It unfolds through measured strides, each step placed with an awareness shaped by weight, balance, and the quiet demands of efficiency. Giganotosaurus carries its motion through long limbs that extend beneath the body, aligned to support both reach and stability as it moves across varied ground. The legs form the foundation of this motion. The femur and tibia work in coordination, creating a structure that favors forward extension without sacrificing control. Their proportions suggest an animal capable of covering significant distance with each step, the stride length extending beyond what shorter, heavier builds might allow. As the foot meets the ground, force transfers upward through the limb, guided along joints that absorb impact while maintaining alignment. This interaction between bone and muscle creates a rhythm that can be sustained over time rather than expended in brief bursts. Stride length becomes a defining feature of how Giganotosaurus moves. With each extension of the hind limb, the body advances smoothly, the forward momentum carried through the spine and balanced by the tail behind. The head remains aligned with this motion, minimizing unnecessary shifts that would disrupt efficiency. In this way, distance is gained not through rapid steps, but through the quiet expansion of each movement, allowing the animal to travel without constant acceleration. Estimates of speed remain within a moderate range when compared to smaller theropods. While it could likely reach a pace faster than a slow walk, the constraints of mass limit the extent of rapid acceleration. The structure of the limbs supports a form of movement that prioritizes control and endurance over peak velocity. Muscles generate force in a way that avoids excess strain, preserving the integrity of joints that must carry significant weight with each stride. This reflects a broader trade-off between size and mobility. As body mass increases, the ability to move quickly diminishes, not through lack of strength, but through the demands placed on skeletal support. Giganotosaurus balances this by distributing its weight along a longer frame, reducing the concentration of stress in any single area. This allows for a level of mobility that remains effective within its environment, even if it does not match the agility of smaller predators. When placed alongside other large theropods, differences in movement become more apparent. Tyrannosaurus rex, with its heavier build and deeper torso, carries a different center of gravity, one that influences how it steps and accelerates. Its limbs, though powerful, support a structure that favors force over extended reach. In contrast, Giganotosaurus appears adapted for covering ground with greater fluidity, its stride extending farther while maintaining balance across its length. These variations do not suggest superiority, but specialization. Each body reflects a response to the conditions it evolved within, shaped by the interplay between prey, terrain, and internal structure. Giganotosaurus moves as a system where length, muscle distribution, and limb alignment work together to create a steady, continuous motion. In this quiet progression across the land, speed becomes less about sudden bursts and more about sustained movement. Each step carries intention, each stride part of a larger rhythm that allows the animal to navigate its world without excess effort. The result is a form of motion that feels deliberate, shaped by the balance between what the body can do and what the environment requires. Light reaches the eye before any movement is made, carrying shapes, distances, and subtle changes that guide what follows. In Giganotosaurus, vision begins with placement, the position of the eyes set along the skull in a way that brings their fields forward. This forward orientation creates an area where both eyes overlap, allowing depth to be perceived not as a flat surface, but as a layered space where distance can be judged with quiet precision. This overlap forms the basis of binocular vision, a system that allows the brain to compare two slightly different images and merge them into a single understanding of depth. For a predator, this ability becomes essential, not in isolation, but as part of a broader network of perception. The elongated skull supports this arrangement, aligning the eyes in a way that extends the forward field without sacrificing awareness of the surrounding environment. The result is a balance between focus and breadth, where attention can narrow without losing connection to the wider space. Within the act of hunting, vision operates continuously, guiding each movement before it occurs. Subtle shifts in posture, changes in speed, and the timing of approach all depend on accurate visual input. The distance between predator and prey is not fixed, but constantly adjusted through perception. Each step is informed by what the eyes convey, allowing the body to respond with measured control. In this way, sight becomes less about reacting and more about anticipating, aligning motion with what is already understood. The importance of this system extends into the structure of the brain itself. In theropods, regions associated with vision, particularly the optic lobes, show development that suggests a reliance on visual processing. These areas receive and interpret signals from the eyes, translating patterns of light into information that can guide behavior. In Giganotosaurus, this integration would have supported the coordination required for its style of movement and interaction, linking perception directly to action. Depth perception plays a quiet but central role in this process. Judging the distance to a moving target requires more than simple recognition. It involves continuous recalibration as both predator and prey shift positions over time. The forward placement of the eyes allows Giganotosaurus to maintain this awareness, adjusting its approach without relying on sudden corrections. Each movement becomes part of a controlled sequence, guided by a steady stream of visual information. This reliance on sight does not exist in isolation from the rest of the body. The alignment of the head, the flexibility of the neck, and the stability of the torso all support the function of the eyes. When the head moves, it does so in a way that preserves the clarity of what is seen, minimizing unnecessary motion that could disrupt focus. The body follows, maintaining balance so that perception remains uninterrupted. Across open spaces and within more enclosed areas, vision adapts to different conditions. In broader landscapes, it allows for early detection, recognizing movement at a distance. In more confined settings, it refines detail, guiding precise actions within a smaller range. In both cases, it remains a constant presence, shaping how Giganotosaurus engages with its surroundings. Through this integration of structure and function, sight becomes more than a passive sense. It forms the foundation of awareness, linking the external world to the internal processes that guide movement, ensuring that each action aligns with what is seen and understood. Before anything comes into view, the air already carries information, drifting unseen yet constant, touching the senses long before movement begins. For Giganotosaurus, smell would have formed a quiet layer of awareness, one that extended beyond immediate sight and reached into distances where presence could be detected without direct contact. It is not a dramatic sense, but a continuous one, gathering traces that linger in the atmosphere and guiding attention toward what cannot yet be seen. Within theropods, the olfactory bulbs, the regions of the brain responsible for processing scent, show development that suggests an active role in perception. In Giganotosaurus, these structures likely supported a sensitivity to airborne signals, allowing the animal to distinguish between different sources carried by shifting currents. The brain receives these signals and interprets them, building a map that is not visual but chemical, composed of faint gradients and subtle variations. This form of awareness operates alongside vision rather than replacing it. Where the eyes define shape and distance, smell provides context, indicating what lies beyond immediate reach. The two senses blend, each informing the other, creating a more complete understanding of the environment. A distant scent can direct the gaze, while a visual confirmation refines what has already been suggested by the air. The environment itself contributes to how scent is distributed. Moving air currents carry particles across uneven ground, dispersing them through open spaces and concentrating them along natural pathways. Giganotosaurus would have moved within this shifting field, adjusting its direction in response to changes that are not visible but can be followed. The ground, warmed by constant climate, releases its own subtle signals, while vegetation adds layers of complexity that mix and overlap. In this setting, the detection of prey becomes a gradual process. Rather than encountering an animal suddenly, there is often a progression, a faint indication that grows clearer as distance closes. Scent does not reveal precise form, but it suggests presence, guiding movement in a way that reduces uncertainty. This allows the predator to approach with a degree of preparation, aligning its actions with information gathered over time. Carcasses, too, would have contributed to this sensory landscape. The remains of large animals produce distinct chemical signals that persist, carried across distances that extend beyond direct visibility. Giganotosaurus may have followed these traces, not as a primary strategy, but as part of a broader awareness that includes both active hunting and opportunistic feeding. The ability to detect such signals expands the range of possibilities, allowing the animal to respond to what the environment offers without relying solely on direct pursuit. This constant flow of information creates a form of awareness that is both subtle and continuous. There is no clear beginning or end to it, only an ongoing process where signals are received, interpreted, and integrated into movement. The body responds without urgency, adjusting direction and pace in accordance with what is sensed. Within this quiet system, Giganotosaurus remains connected to its surroundings in ways that extend beyond what can be seen. Smell becomes a thread that links distant events to immediate action, allowing the animal to move through its world with a sense of continuity, guided by signals that drift through the air long before they resolve into form. Within the quiet enclosure of the skull, structure continues in a form that cannot be seen directly, yet shapes every action that follows. The brain of Giganotosaurus, preserved only in impressions and internal cavities, offers a measured glimpse into how this animal processed its world. Its size, when compared to the overall body, does not suggest an expansion beyond what is typical for large theropods, but neither does it indicate limitation. Instead, it reflects a balance, where capacity aligns with the demands placed upon it. Relative to its mass, the brain remains modest, a pattern common among large dinosaurs whose bodies required significant energy to maintain. This does not imply simplicity in behavior, but rather an efficiency in how neural resources are used. The regions associated with coordination, sensory integration, and movement would have been well developed, supporting the precise control already evident in its structure. Signals move through this system continuously, linking perception to action without unnecessary delay. When placed alongside Tyrannosaurus rex, the comparison reveals both similarity and divergence. Tyrannosaurus rex is often noted for having a relatively larger brain in proportion to its body, particularly in areas linked to sensory processing. This has led to suggestions of increased behavioral flexibility. Giganotosaurus, while not matching that proportional increase, still maintains the necessary organization to support complex interactions with its environment. The difference appears not as a gap in ability, but as a variation in emphasis, each species reflecting its own ecological pressures. Behavior arises from this foundation, shaped by both instinct and the capacity to adjust. Instinct provides the baseline, guiding fundamental actions such as movement, feeding, and response to stimuli. These patterns are deeply embedded, allowing the animal to function without the need for constant deliberation. Yet within these patterns, there remains space for adjustment, subtle changes in behavior that respond to immediate conditions. Problem solving, in this context, does not take the form of abstract reasoning, but of practical adaptation. Giganotosaurus would have adjusted its approach based on the behavior of prey, the contours of the land, and the outcomes of previous interactions. This form of intelligence is quiet and continuous, expressed through timing, positioning, and the selection of action rather than through visible complexity. Each decision blends instinct with experience, creating a response that fits the moment. Behavioral complexity emerges not from isolated acts, but from the accumulation of these adjustments over time. Repeated encounters refine responses, allowing the animal to move through its environment with increasing efficiency. This does not require conscious reflection, but rather a system capable of integrating new information into existing patterns. The brain supports this through its ability to process sensory input and coordinate movement, ensuring that behavior remains aligned with changing conditions. Social behavior, while uncertain in detail, may also reflect this balance. Interactions with others of the same species would have required recognition, spacing, and possibly coordination, each guided by both instinct and situational awareness. Even in the absence of clear evidence, the structure of the brain suggests a capacity for such interactions, grounded in the same systems that govern all other behavior. In this way, intelligence in Giganotosaurus is not defined by excess, but by sufficiency. It is shaped by what is needed to navigate a complex world, to respond to its rhythms, and to act within it with consistency. The mind remains closely tied to the body, each supporting the other in a continuous exchange that guides every movement through the landscape it inhabits. Bones sometimes gather in ways that feel intentional, though time rarely preserves the moment that brought them together. In the Patagonian record, there are sites where multiple individuals of Mapusaurus lie within the same deposits, their remains arranged not as scattered fragments, but as a quiet assembly. These groupings do not speak directly, yet they suggest proximity in life, a possibility that large predators of this lineage did not always move in isolation. Giganotosaurus belongs to this same broader family, sharing structural traits and ecological roles with Mapusaurus. This connection invites a careful consideration of behavior, though it does not provide certainty. Fossil assemblages can form through many pathways. Individuals drawn together by shared water sources, environmental pressures, or events that leave multiple bodies in one place. Still, the repeated appearance of grouped remains introduces a pattern that cannot be dismissed entirely. If such predators did at times move together, the implications extend into how they may have approached prey. Large herbivores, already present in quiet memory, represent challenges that exceed the capacity of a single, brief encounter. Coordination, even if loose and temporary, could alter the dynamics of these interactions. Multiple individuals, spaced across a landscape, might influence the movement of a herd, guiding it toward positions where vulnerability increases. This does not require complex planning in the way modern minds might imagine, but rather a shared response to opportunity, where each individual acts within a broader pattern. At the same time, there is equal reason to consider solitude as a dominant mode. Large predators often require extensive resources, and competition between individuals can limit the benefits of remaining close. Giganotosaurus, with its size and energy demands, may have spent much of its time alone, moving through its environment with an awareness shaped by distance rather than proximity to others of its kind. Encounters between individuals could have been brief, defined by tolerance or avoidance rather than sustained association. The debate around pack hunting in large theropods reflects this balance between possibility and uncertainty. Evidence remains indirect, drawn from bone beds, trackways, and comparisons with related species. Some interpretations suggest coordinated behavior, while others point toward coincidental grouping shaped by environmental factors. Without direct observation, the distinction remains subtle, resting on patterns that can be read in more than one way. Within this uncertainty, a middle ground begins to take shape. It is possible that Giganotosaurus did not adhere strictly to one mode of behavior, but shifted depending on circumstance. Periods of solitude may have been interrupted by moments of overlap where individuals found themselves drawn to the same resources or opportunities. In such moments, behavior could align briefly, creating the appearance of cooperation without requiring long-term social structure. This flexibility would align with the broader patterns already present, where movement, perception, and action adapt to changing conditions. Whether alone or in the presence of others, the focus remains on interaction with the environment and the prey within it. Each individual responds to what is available, adjusting its approach in ways that do not depend on fixed roles. Through these fragments of evidence, Giganotosaurus emerges not as strictly solitary or fully social, but as part of a continuum, its behavior shaped by the same quiet forces that guide all life. The question remains open, held within the spaces between fossils, where interpretation continues to move as slowly as the stone that preserves it. Across the wide expanse of its range, the presence of prey defined not only where Giganotosaurus moved, but how it sustained itself over time. The animals it encountered were not small or fleeting. They were immense, carrying weight and mass that reshaped the land as they fed and traveled. Among them, the towering forms of sauropods, including Argentinosaurus, formed a constant, distant rhythm, their movement steady, their scale beyond easy challenge. Such prey did not invite direct confrontation without consequence. An adult sauropod, fully grown, represented a structure of muscle and bone that resisted simple approaches. Its height and mass created natural defenses, and its presence within a group added another layer of complexity. For Giganotosaurus, engaging with such an animal required more than proximity. It demanded timing, selection, and an understanding of when opportunity aligned with possibility. Within these herds, variation existed, and it is here that patterns begin to form. Juveniles, smaller and less stable, would have presented different conditions than their adult counterparts. Their movements may have been less coordinated, their responses slower or less predictable. Targeting such individuals reduces the resistance faced, allowing the predator to operate within the limits of its design. This does not eliminate risk, but it shifts the balance in a way that makes success more attainable. Beyond sauropods, other large herbivores moved through the same environment, each contributing to the available range of prey. These animals, though smaller in comparison, still required careful engagement. Their speed, awareness, and group behavior created their own forms of resistance, shaping how Giganotosaurus approached them. The diversity of prey meant that feeding strategies could not remain fixed, but adapted to the specific characteristics of each encounter. Energy lies at the center of this relationship. A body of such size requires a substantial intake to maintain its functions, to support movement, growth, and survival. Each hunt carries a cost, measured not only in effort, but in the time spent locating and engaging prey. The return must justify this expenditure, creating a balance between risk and reward that guides behavior. A successful interaction with a large herbivore could provide sustenance over an extended period, reducing the need for constant activity. This dynamic shapes decision-making in subtle ways. The choice of target, the timing of approach, and the manner of engagement all reflect an underlying calculation, one that balances immediate opportunity with long-term need. Giganotosaurus does not act randomly within this system, but follows patterns that align with the flow of energy through its environment. In this quiet exchange between predator and prey, scale becomes a defining feature. The animals involved exist at levels where each interaction carries weight beyond the moment itself. The outcome influences not only the individuals directly involved, but the broader structure of the ecosystem, redistributing energy and altering movement across the landscape. Through this lens, Giganotosaurus is not simply a hunter among many, but part of a larger network, its survival linked to the presence and behavior of the immense herbivores it follows. Each encounter reflects this connection, a continuous interaction shaped by size, need, and the steady passage of time across a world built for giants. Morning arrives not with a sharp change, but as a gradual lifting of light across the land, revealing forms that were already present in softer outlines. The air holds a gentle warmth even at this early hour, carrying the lingering traces of night without any sense of cold. Giganotosaurus stands within this transition, its body still for a moment as the world settles into visibility, each detail becoming clearer as light spreads across the ground. The floodplain stretches outward, its surface marked by subtle variations in texture where water has passed and withdrawn. Patches of firmer ground alternate with softer layers that hold the impressions of movement from the hours before. As Giganotosaurus begins to move, its steps follow a measured rhythm, each foot placed with quiet certainty. The ground responds with slight compression, a temporary record that fades as the day continues. Nearby, smaller animals shift through the low vegetation, their presence woven into the broader pattern of life. They move without drawing attention, their paths crossing and diverging in ways that rarely intersect directly with the larger forms that share the same space. Giganotosaurus passes among these movements without interruption, its awareness extending outward without altering its course. Further across the plain, larger herbivores gather in loose formations, their bodies aligned with the availability of food and water. They move slowly, their motion steady and continuous, creating a sense of scale that defines the landscape. Giganotosaurus does not approach immediately, instead maintaining distance, observing the patterns that unfold. The spacing between individuals, the direction of their movement, and the subtle shifts within the group all become part of a quiet calculation that unfolds over time. As the sun rises higher, the light sharpens, bringing greater contrast to the terrain. Shadows shorten, and the details of the ground become more distinct. Giganotosaurus adjusts its path accordingly, moving along routes that offer both visibility and efficiency. The body remains aligned with its motion, conserving energy while maintaining readiness for change. Along the edges of the floodplain, vegetation thickens, forming areas where sightlines narrow and movement becomes more contained. Giganotosaurus passes near these regions, its presence briefly intersecting with the boundaries between open and enclosed space. Within these areas, other species remain partially hidden, their movements suggested by subtle disturbances rather than direct visibility. The predator's pace remains unchanged, neither accelerating nor slowing, but continuing with a steady progression. Water collects in shallow channels, reflecting the light in fragmented patterns. Giganotosaurus approaches one of these, lowering its head slightly as it moves closer. The surface remains undisturbed until contact is made, then settles again as the moment passes. Around this point, tracks converge, evidence of repeated visits by various animals, each leaving behind traces that overlap and fade. As the day continues, the rhythm of the environment remains consistent. Movement occurs without urgency, interactions unfolding in quiet sequences that do not disrupt the overall balance. Giganotosaurus remains part of this continuity, its actions integrated into the broader flow rather than standing apart from it. Within this passage of time, nothing draws sharp boundaries between moments. Morning becomes day without clear division, and the landscape maintains its steady presence. Giganotosaurus moves through it as it always does, guided by patterns that extend beyond any single point, its existence woven into the calm, continuous motion of the world around it. Life begins at a scale almost unrecognizable, compared to the form it will become, a small body emerging into a world already filled with motion and presence far beyond its own. A young Giganotosaurus enters this landscape not as a dominant figure, but as something vulnerable, its early moments defined by the need to remain unnoticed within an environment shaped by much larger lives. At this stage, survival depends on restraint rather than reach. The hatchling carries proportions that differ from the adult, its limbs relatively long compared to its body, suggesting an early emphasis on mobility. Movement becomes a quiet necessity, allowing it to navigate through cover and avoid encounters it cannot withstand. The world around it does not change to accommodate its size, and so it must adapt quickly, responding to subtle shifts in its surroundings with careful precision. Growth in theropods follows a pattern that appears steady rather than abrupt. Bone structure records this progression, showing layers that reflect continuous development over time. Giganotosaurus likely experienced a phase of accelerated growth during its early years, increasing in size at a pace that reduces vulnerability. This period transforms the body gradually, strengthening the limbs, expanding the torso, and reshaping the skull into its more recognizable form. As size increases, so does the range of possible interactions. A juvenile begins to move beyond the narrow spaces that once offered protection, entering more open areas where visibility extends farther. With this transition, behavior shifts as well. The need to avoid becomes balanced with the ability to engage, though still within limits defined by its current stage of development. Diet reflects this progression. In its earliest phase, Giganotosaurus would have relied on smaller prey, animals that match its scale and can be handled without excessive risk. These early feeding habits provide the energy required for growth while allowing the young predator to refine its movements and responses. Each interaction contributes to a gradual adjustment, aligning instinct with experience as the body continues to change. Over time, the increasing size opens access to larger prey, though this transition does not occur instantly. There is a period where capability and opportunity begin to overlap, where the young individual explores the edges of what it can manage. This phase introduces new challenges, requiring adjustments in approach and timing, shaping behavior in ways that persist into adulthood. Survival during these early stages remains uncertain. The same environment that supports growth also presents constant risk. Larger predators, including members of its own species, may pose a threat, and competition for resources limits the margin for error. Each day contributes to the likelihood of reaching maturity, but the path is not guaranteed. As adulthood approaches, the body settles into its full proportions, and the patterns established during growth become integrated into a more stable form of behavior. Movement, feeding, and interaction align with the capabilities of the mature animal, reflecting the cumulative effects of its development. This progression from hatchling to adult does not occur in isolation from the environment. It unfolds within the same shifting landscape, guided by the same forces that shape all life within it. Each stage carries its own demands, its own adjustments, forming a continuous passage where change is constant, yet gradual enough to remain almost unnoticed within the larger flow of time. No single presence, no matter how large, exists without others pressing quietly at the edges of the same space. In the world of Giganotosaurus, other carnivores moved across overlapping ranges, each following the same currents of prey and water, each shaped by similar needs, yet carrying different proportions and strategies. These encounters were not constant, but they were never entirely absent, forming a subtle tension within the landscape. Among these predators were smaller theropods, lighter in build and more agile, capable of moving through areas where a larger body could not pass as easily. Their size allowed them to exploit different opportunities, focusing on prey that required less force to overcome. Though they did not directly rival Giganotosaurus in scale, their presence contributed to the broader pattern of competition, drawing from the same pool of available resources in ways that reduced excess and maintained balance. There were also other large carnivores, closer in size and capability, whose existence introduced a different form of interaction. These animals would have shared similar ecological roles, moving through comparable environments and responding to the same signals carried through air and ground. When their paths crossed, the outcome would not always lead to conflict, but the potential for it remained. Each individual carries an awareness of the other, a recognition shaped by size, posture, and movement. Competition for resources unfolds gradually rather than in sudden confrontation. A carcass left behind becomes a point of convergence, drawing multiple predators into proximity. The order in which they arrive, their condition, and their relative size all influence how the interaction develops. Sometimes one feeds while another waits at a distance, the exchange governed by quiet assessments rather than immediate action. At other times, proximity leads to displays of presence, subtle shifts in posture that communicate intention without direct engagement. Territory, in this context, is not defined by fixed boundaries, but by patterns of movement and familiarity. Giganotosaurus may have ranged across areas it knew well, returning to regions where prey appeared consistently. Within these spaces, it becomes attuned to the rhythms of the environment, recognizing changes that signal the presence of others. This awareness allows it to adjust its path, avoiding unnecessary encounters while maintaining access to essential resources. Dominance, when it occurs, is expressed through these interactions rather than constant assertion. A larger individual may displace a smaller one through presence alone, its size and posture enough to shift the balance without direct conflict. Such moments pass quickly, leaving little trace beyond the redistribution of space and access. The energy required for sustained conflict remains too great to expend without necessity, encouraging outcomes that preserve strength rather than diminish it. Within this network of predators, each species occupies a position that reflects its capabilities. Giganotosaurus, with its size and structure, holds a prominent role, yet it remains part of a system where no single presence excludes all others. The landscape supports multiple forms of predation, each contributing to the flow of energy through the environment. In this quiet coexistence, competition does not disrupt the overall rhythm, but becomes one of its defining elements. Movements adjust, paths shift, and interactions unfold with a restraint shaped by shared dependence on the same world. Giganotosaurus moves within this balance, its presence both influenced by and influencing the other hunters that share its range. Scars do not always vanish with time. Sometimes they settle into bone, quiet records of moments that did not end in death. In the remains attributed to Giganotosaurus and its close relatives, there are signs of injury that healed, fractures that fused, surfaces that remodeled themselves into something slightly altered yet stable. These traces suggest that damage was not uncommon and that survival often depended on enduring what could not be avoided. Hunting at such a scale carries risks that extend beyond the immediate encounter. Large herbivores do not yield easily, and their defenses are not limited to size alone. Movement itself becomes a hazard, the shifting of weight, the swing of a limb, the sudden change in direction. When Giganotosaurus engaged with prey of this magnitude, the potential for injury was always present, even when the interaction followed a controlled pattern. A misstep could transfer force back into the predator's own body, stressing joints or causing imbalance. A well-placed movement from the prey could result in impact, delivering enough force to damage bone or muscle. These moments, though brief, carry lasting consequences. The evidence of healed injuries indicates that such events did occur and that individuals sometimes continued to live long enough for recovery to take place. Healing itself reflects a capacity within the body to respond and adapt. Bone, once fractured, begins a process of repair, forming new material that stabilizes the damaged area. This process takes time, during which the animal must continue to function, to move, and to feed. The presence of healed wounds suggests that Giganotosaurus could endure periods of reduced capability, adjusting its behavior to accommodate temporary limitations. During recovery, the approach to feeding may have shifted. Engaging in high-risk encounters would carry greater danger when the body is not at full strength. This could lead to reliance on less demanding opportunities, perhaps focusing on smaller prey or utilizing resources that require less direct confrontation. Such adjustments do not alter the fundamental nature of the predator, but reflect a flexibility that supports survival across varying conditions. Injuries also influence movement. A limb that has experienced damage may not carry weight in the same way, leading to subtle changes in stride or posture. Over time, these adjustments become integrated into the overall pattern of motion, allowing the animal to maintain balance despite imperfection. The body compensates, redistributing effort across other areas to preserve function. The environment itself plays a role in this process. A landscape that offers multiple pathways to resources allows for adaptation during recovery. Giganotosaurus would have navigated this space with an awareness shaped by its condition, choosing routes and behaviors that align with its current capabilities. This interaction between body and environment supports the continuation of life even when damage has occurred. Within these traces of injury and healing, a different aspect of existence emerges. Survival is not defined solely by strength or success, but by the ability to endure and adapt. Each healed fracture represents a moment where the balance shifted but did not break, where the body absorbed impact and returned to function over time. In this quiet record, preserved within bone, Giganotosaurus appears not only as a hunter, but as a survivor, carrying forward despite the risks inherent in its world. Seasons pass without sharp boundaries, yet the balance within them is never fixed. Over longer stretches of time, subtle shifts begin to accumulate, changes in temperature and rainfall that alter the rhythm of the land in ways that are gradual but persistent. In the world of Giganotosaurus, these variations do not arrive as sudden disruption, but as slow adjustments that ripple outward through every layer of the environment. Rainfall patterns influence the shape of the land more than any single event. When water becomes more abundant, low areas expand, vegetation thickens, and the distribution of plant life shifts outward. When rainfall lessens, those same areas contract, exposing ground that had remained covered, altering the availability of food for herbivores. These changes unfold over cycles that extend beyond a single lifetime, yet their effects are felt continuously. Temperature follows a similar path, not through extreme swings, but through gradual variation that influences growth and decay. Slight increases in warmth can accelerate plant development, encouraging denser vegetation and supporting larger populations of herbivores. A subtle decrease, sustained over time, may slow that growth, reducing the abundance that once seemed constant. In such a system, even small changes can reshape the balance between what is available and what is required. For Giganotosaurus, these environmental pressures are not experienced directly as isolated events, but through their impact on prey. Large herbivores depend on steady access to vegetation, and any shift in plant distribution influences where they move and how they gather. As food becomes more or less available, herds adjust their patterns, spreading out or concentrating in areas where resources remain reliable. These movements, in turn, redefine the paths that a predator must follow. The connection between climate and hunting becomes clear through this chain of influence. When prey is widely distributed, encounters become less frequent, requiring greater movement across the landscape. When resources concentrate in specific regions, interactions become more predictable, though competition may increase in those same areas. Giganotosaurus adapts to these conditions not by altering its fundamental design, but by adjusting its movement and timing in response to the shifting presence of prey. Vegetation itself reflects these pressures in quiet ways. Changes in rainfall and temperature influence not only the quantity of plant life, but its structure and composition. Some areas may become denser, offering more cover, while others open, reducing concealment and altering visibility. These shifts affect how animals move through the environment, shaping the conditions under which encounters occur. Water sources also respond to these changes, expanding or retreating as rainfall patterns evolve. Rivers may alter their courses over time, creating new pathways while abandoning others. These adjustments influence the distribution of life across the landscape, drawing animals toward reliable sources and leaving other regions less active. Within this continuous process, stability remains relative rather than absolute. The world of Giganotosaurus does not stand still, but changes in ways that are often too gradual to notice in a single moment. Yet over extended periods, these shifts redefine the conditions of existence, influencing where life gathers and how it persists. Giganotosaurus moves within this evolving system, its presence shaped by forces that extend beyond its immediate perception. Climate and environment form a quiet framework, guiding the distribution of resources and the patterns of life that depend on them. Through this connection, the predator remains linked to changes that unfold across the landscape, its survival tied to a balance that is always in motion. The land itself moves, though the motion is too slow to be seen within a single lifetime. Beneath forests, rivers, and open ground, the crust shifts in a long, steady process, carrying entire continents across the surface of the planet. By the time Giganotosaurus existed, South America had already begun its separation, drifting away from Africa and forming a distinct region surrounded by widening oceans. This separation did not happen suddenly, but unfolded over millions of years, creating distance where once there had been connection. As the gap between continents expanded, the movement of animals between them became limited, then eventually ceased. What remained were populations that shared ancient origins but began to follow different paths, shaped by the conditions unique to their new surroundings. Within South America, this isolation allowed ecosystems to develop with a degree of independence. The absence of certain competitors, combined with the presence of others, created a balance that differed from regions across the ocean. Giganotosaurus emerged within this context, part of a lineage that evolved alongside local prey and within environments that followed their own patterns of change. Isolation influences evolution in ways that are often subtle but persistent. Without the continuous exchange of species between continents, traits that prove effective within a specific environment become more pronounced over time. In the case of large predators, this can lead to variations in body structure, feeding strategies, and behavior, each reflecting the demands of the ecosystem they inhabit. For Giganotosaurus, the conditions of South America favored a particular set of adaptations. The presence of large herbivores, the structure of the landscape, and the distribution of resources all contributed to shaping its form. Over generations, these influences guided the development of features that aligned with local challenges, creating a predator that fit its environment with increasing precision. At the same time, other continents followed their own evolutionary trajectories. In North America and Asia, different groups of theropods developed under separate conditions, leading to distinct forms that would later become more familiar. These parallel developments highlight how similar ecological roles can be filled by different species, each arriving at solutions that reflect their unique circumstances. The oceans between continents acted as barriers, limiting interaction and reinforcing these differences. While smaller organisms and certain plant forms could disperse across distances, large terrestrial animals remained confined to their regions. This confinement did not restrict diversity, but instead encouraged it, allowing ecosystems to explore a range of possibilities without direct competition from distant species. Over time, these isolated systems produced a variety of large predators, each shaped by the interplay between environment and available prey. Giganotosaurus stands within this pattern, its characteristics reflecting the specific pressures of South America during the mid-Cretaceous. Its structure, behavior, and role within the ecosystem are all linked to this broader process of separation and divergence. In this slow movement of continents and the gradual isolation that followed, the foundations of diversity were established. The world did not divide into identical regions, but into distinct environments, each supporting its own forms of life. Giganotosaurus emerges from this process not as an anomaly, but as a natural outcome of a land that had become its own, shaped by distance, time, and the quiet forces that guide evolution across the surface of the earth. Absence rarely announces itself. It settles slowly, leaving behind spaces that once held movement. The disappearance of Giganotosaurus does not trace back to a single moment or sudden event, but to a gradual shift in the conditions that once supported it. Over time, the balance that defined its world began to change, and with it, the place it occupied within that system. These changes unfolded across long spans, shaped by alterations in climate, landscape, and the distribution of life. As environments shifted, the patterns of vegetation and water adjusted, influencing where herbivores could feed and gather. The immense prey that once moved in steady rhythms across the land may have declined or altered their ranges, redistributing the resources that sustained large predators. For Giganotosaurus, whose existence was closely tied to these animals, such changes would have carried lasting consequences. The process is not one of sudden loss, but of gradual reduction. As prey becomes less abundant or less accessible, the energy required to sustain a large body increases relative to what can be gained. Each successful hunt becomes more significant, each failure more costly. Over generations, these pressures accumulate, affecting survival and reproduction in ways that are subtle but persistent. At the same time, other predator lineages continued to evolve, adapting to the changing conditions in ways that differed from earlier forms. New groups, shaped by the same environmental pressures, may have developed traits that allowed them to operate more efficiently within the emerging landscape. These differences do not imply direct competition in a simple sense, but they contribute to a shifting balance where certain forms become more suited to prevailing conditions. In this context, Giganotosaurus does not vanish abruptly, but recedes as the environment moves beyond the range of conditions that once favored its design. The traits that defined its success remain, but the world around them no longer aligns in the same way. Over time, populations diminish, their presence becoming less frequent until it is no longer sustained. Fossil evidence reflects this quiet transition. There is no single boundary marking the end, no clear line separating presence from absence. Instead, there is a thinning of records, a gradual fading that mirrors the process itself. Layers of sediment continue to form, preserving what remains, while the living forms that once moved across the surface give way to those that follow. This pattern is not unique to Giganotosaurus, but part of a broader cycle that shapes life across the planet. Species emerge, adapt, and persist for as long as conditions support them, then yield as those conditions change. The process is continuous, guided by forces that operate beyond any single organism or lineage. In the case of Giganotosaurus, its disappearance reflects the interplay between environment and form, between the needs of a body and the resources available to sustain it. As the balance shifted, so too did the viability of its way of life, leading to a gradual conclusion rather than a sudden end. What remains is not the moment of disappearance, but the record of existence, preserved in fragments that continue to speak quietly of a time when its presence was part of the steady rhythm of the world. Long after the presence of Giganotosaurus fades from the record, another lineage continues to change in quieter ways, its beginnings far smaller and less imposing than what it will eventually become. The ancestors of Tyrannosaurus do not begin as dominant figures, but as modest theropods moving through ecosystems already occupied by larger predators. Their early forms reflect a different balance: lighter bodies, longer limbs, and proportions that suggest agility rather than overwhelming force. These early tyrannosaurs exist alongside other groups, including the Carcharodontosaurids, sharing landscapes without yet overtaking them. Their role within these systems appears secondary, shaped by opportunities that do not require direct competition with the largest hunters. This period of coexistence allows gradual refinement, traits emerging over generations that begin to shift the trajectory of the lineage. As time continues, environmental conditions evolve, and with them, the structure of ecosystems changes. The large predators that once dominated certain regions decline, their presence becoming less consistent. Into this shifting space, tyrannosaurs begin to expand. Their bodies grow larger, their skulls deepen, and their bite becomes increasingly powerful. These changes do not occur abruptly, but unfold through a series of incremental adjustments that align with the opportunities presented by the environment. The rise of tyrannosaurs reflects a shift in dominance, not through direct replacement alone, but through adaptation to conditions that favor different strategies. Where earlier predators relied on reach and slicing, tyrannosaurs develop a system built around force and compression. Their teeth thicken, their jaws strengthen, and their overall structure becomes more compact, allowing them to apply pressure in a way that alters how they interact with prey. This transition suggests a change in how large predators approached the same fundamental challenge. The environments they inhabit may have supported different prey distributions, requiring adjustments in feeding behavior and hunting technique. Tyrannosaurs, with their evolving bite, could engage with prey in a manner that reduced the need for repeated actions, instead focusing on singular, forceful interactions. At the same time, their sensory capabilities continue to develop, supporting a form of awareness that complements their physical changes. Vision, smell, and coordination integrate into a system that allows precise timing and controlled movement. These traits, combined with their increasing size, position tyrannosaurs to occupy roles that were once held by other groups but now require a different set of adaptations. The shift from one dominant lineage to another does not represent a simple replacement, but a transition shaped by the interplay of environment, prey, and evolutionary possibility. Each group reflects the conditions of its time, responding to pressures that guide the development of specific traits. As those conditions change, so too does the balance of which forms are best suited to persist. Tyrannosaurus stands as a later expression of this lineage, carrying forward the traits that proved effective within its environment. Its presence marks not the beginning of large predatory dominance, but a continuation of a pattern that has already unfolded in different forms. The rise of tyrannosaurs emerges from this continuity, shaped by gradual change and the quiet influence of shifting ecosystems. Within this process, the world does not replace one king with another in a single moment. Instead, it adjusts slowly, allowing new forms to emerge as others recede, each step part of a larger, ongoing transformation that moves forward without interruption. There is a shift that occurs not only in time, but in the way a body meets the world, a change that can be traced through structure rather than appearance alone. Tyrannosaurus emerges from its lineage carrying a different balance, one that places weight, force, and density at the center of its design. It does not extend forward in the same elongated form, but gathers mass into a more compact frame, creating a presence that feels concentrated rather than stretched. The skull reflects this change immediately. It deepens and thickens, its bones reinforced to withstand forces that exceed those seen in earlier large theropods. The jaws do not simply close, they compress, applying pressure that transfers directly into whatever lies between them. Teeth, broader and more robust, function less as blades and more as anchors, capable of penetrating and holding while the force of the bite continues to increase. This structure supports a bone-crushing action, one that allows Tyrannosaurus to interact with prey in a fundamentally different way. This approach alters the nature of feeding itself, where slicing relies on repeated contact and gradual reduction. Crushing condenses the process into fewer, more decisive moments. Bone, which once represented a barrier, becomes part of the food source, broken and consumed rather than avoided. This expands the range of what can be utilized, allowing Tyrannosaurus to extract energy from parts of the body that remain inaccessible to predators built on a different design. The body supports this function through its overall construction. A heavier build centers mass closer to the core, creating stability that allows force to be applied without compromising balance. The torso deepens, the limbs adjust to support the increased weight, and the entire structure aligns around the ability to deliver and sustain pressure. Movement remains present, but it serves a different emphasis, less about covering distance with efficiency, more about maintaining control during moments of engagement. This shift in form corresponds to a change in ecological role. Tyrannosaurus occupies a position where direct confrontation becomes more viable, its design allowing it to engage with prey in a manner that reduces the need for extended sequences of action. The environment it inhabits supports this approach, with prey types and distributions that align with the capabilities of a predator built for force. The interaction between predator and prey becomes more immediate, shaped by the ability to end encounters through compression rather than accumulation. At the same time, this does not remove the need for awareness or timing. Even with such strength, the body must still align its actions with the conditions of the environment. The difference lies in how those actions are expressed, through concentrated force rather than repeated motion. In comparison to Giganotosaurus, the contrast becomes clear without diminishing either form. One represents a system built around reach and sequence, the other around density and impact. Each reflects the pressures of its own time, the conditions that shaped its evolution and defined its place within the world. Through this lens, Tyrannosaurus stands not as a refinement of what came before, but as a different answer entirely, one that approaches the same challenge from another direction, guided by the quiet influence of changing ecosystems and the demands they impose. Two forms emerge across different stretches of time, each occupying a similar position, yet shaped by entirely different approaches to the same enduring challenge. Giganotosaurus and Tyrannosaurus stand as parallel expressions, not connected through direct succession, but through a shared role that demands efficiency, control, and the ability to overcome prey larger than themselves. Giganotosaurus carries its strategy through motion and reach. Its body extends forward, its skull lengthened, its teeth aligned as cutting edges that engage through repetition. Each action builds upon the last, a sequence that unfolds gradually rather than concluding in a single moment. The predator approaches, delivers a controlled strike, then withdraws just enough to continue the process. Damage accumulates over time, shaping the outcome through persistence and precision. This method reflects a system that values continuity. Movement remains fluid, the body aligned to support repeated interaction without excessive strain. The environment becomes part of the process, guiding, positioning, and timing, so that each action occurs within a favorable context. Giganotosaurus does not rely on overwhelming force, but on the consistent application of its design, allowing smaller actions to combine into a decisive result. In contrast, Tyrannosaurus condenses this sequence into fewer steps. Its structure gathers mass toward the center, its skull reinforced to withstand and deliver immense pressure. The bite does not unfold gradually, it resolves quickly, compressing bone and tissue in a single, forceful interaction. Teeth anchor into the target, and the strength of the jaws completes the action without the need for repetition. This approach shifts the emphasis from sequence to impact. Where Giganotosaurus distributes effort across time, Tyrannosaurus concentrates it into singular moments. The body supports this by maintaining stability during these interactions, allowing force to be applied without loss of balance. The result is a feeding strategy that reduces the need for extended engagement, relying instead on the effectiveness of each individual action. Both strategies address the same fundamental problem: how to overcome prey that resists through size and strength. Yet the solutions diverge, shaped by the environments and evolutionary pressures that defined each lineage. Giganotosaurus operates within a system where repeated motion and cutting efficiency provide an advantage, while Tyrannosaurus functions within conditions that favor compression and immediate structural impact. Neither approach exists in isolation from the rest of the body. Each is integrated into a broader design, where skull, limbs, and sensory systems align to support the chosen method. Movement, perception, and feeding all connect, forming a coherent structure that reflects the demands placed upon it. Seen together, these two predators illustrate the range of possibilities available within a single ecological role. The position of apex hunter does not require a single form or behavior, but allows for variation, each path shaped by circumstance and time. Giganotosaurus and Tyrannosaurus do not represent a progression from one to the other, but a divergence, two answers emerging from different conditions. In this quiet comparison, the idea of dominance becomes more complex. It is not defined by a single trait, but by how effectively a set of traits aligns with the world it inhabits. Each of these predators achieves that alignment in its own way, moving through its environment with a strategy that reflects the balance between structure, behavior, and the challenges it was shaped to meet. Across long stretches of time, a pattern begins to repeat, not in identical forms, but in familiar roles that reappear under different conditions. Apex predators do not arise randomly. They emerge as responses to the structure of the ecosystems around them. Each landscape, shaped by climate, geography, and the distribution of life, creates a framework within which certain traits become advantageous, guiding the development of those that will occupy the highest levels of predation. In environments where large herbivores dominate, the demands placed on predators shift accordingly. Bodies must grow to match scale, strength must align with resistance, and behavior must adapt to prey that cannot be overcome through speed alone. This relationship forms a quiet foundation where the presence of one group influences the evolution of the other. Over time, predators develop features that reflect these pressures, not as isolated changes, but as integrated systems that support their role. Giganotosaurus and T. rex represent two expressions of this process, each shaped by the ecosystems they inhabited. Their differences do not arise from chance, but from the specific conditions that guided their development. One evolves within a system where slicing and repetition provide efficiency, while the other emerges in a context that favors compression and force. Both fulfill the role of apex predator, yet they arrive there through distinct pathways. This repetition of roles across time illustrates a broader principle, often described as convergent evolution. Separate lineages, isolated by geography and time, arrive at similar solutions when faced with comparable challenges. The forms may differ in detail, but the underlying function aligns, reflecting the constraints and opportunities presented by the environment. Apex predators, in this sense, are less about lineage and more about position within an ecological structure. The ecosystem itself acts as a guiding force, shaping what is possible and what is sustainable. Availability of prey, distribution of resources, and interactions between species all contribute to defining the traits that will persist. Predators that align with these conditions continue, while those that do not gradually recede. This process unfolds continuously, with no fixed endpoint, only a shifting balance that adjusts as environments change. Over time, these patterns create a sequence where different species occupy similar roles at different moments. The details vary, but the structure remains recognizable. A large predator emerges, adapts to its surroundings, and maintains its position until conditions shift once again. When those shifts occur, new forms arise, carrying forward the role while expressing it in ways that reflect the new context. This continuity does not imply repetition without variation, but rather a series of adaptations that build upon the same foundational needs. Each apex predator represents a solution tailored to its environment, shaped by forces that extend beyond individual traits. The result is a diversity of forms that share a common purpose, each contributing to the ongoing balance within their respective ecosystems. In this broader view, the presence of Giganotosaurus and T. rex becomes part of a larger narrative, one that extends across millions of years. Their differences highlight the flexibility of evolution, while their similarities reveal the constraints that guide it. Together, They illustrate how life continually responds to the conditions it encounters, producing forms that reflect both the uniqueness of their time and the enduring patterns that shape the natural world. It began not with certainty, but with something slightly out of place, a shape emerging from stone that did not match the patterns of the surrounding ground. In the dry expanse of Patagonia, where wind moves steadily across exposed rock, fragments sometimes appear without announcement. Among these fragments, a set of bones lay partially revealed, their surfaces weathered but still holding form after nearly 100 million years. The discovery came in the early 1990s when a local enthusiast, moving through the region with familiarity rather than expectation, noticed the remains embedded in sediment. What followed was a careful process of excavation, guided by patience and attention to detail. As more of the skeleton was uncovered, its scale became clear, the proportions extending far beyond what had initially been visible at the surface. Paleontologists soon joined the effort, bringing with them the tools and methods needed to preserve and interpret what had been found. Among them was Rodolfo Coria, whose work contributed to the formal study and description of the animal. Alongside colleagues, including Leonardo Salgado, the remains were examined, measured, and compared, each fragment placed within a broader framework that allowed the identity of Giganotosaurus to emerge. The skeleton itself was unusually complete, with a significant portion of the bones preserved in relation to one another. This level of completeness provided a rare opportunity to reconstruct the body with greater accuracy than is often possible. The skull, though not entirely intact, retained enough structure to reveal its elongated form, while the limbs and vertebrae offered insight into posture and movement. Yet even within this completeness, there were absences. Certain elements were missing, portions of the skeleton that had either not been preserved or had yet to be discovered. These gaps required interpretation, guided by comparisons with related species and an understanding of theropod anatomy. The reconstruction of Giganotosaurus, therefore, remains both grounded in evidence and shaped by careful inference, a balance between what is known and what can be reasonably suggested. The surrounding rock layers added context to the discovery, placing the animal within a specific moment in geological time. Sediments that once formed part of an ancient landscape now held the remains, preserving them through processes that transformed organic material into fossil. Each layer carried its own history, contributing to the understanding of the environment in which Giganotosaurus once lived. As the bones were removed and transported for study, the initial moment of discovery expanded into a broader investigation. Measurements, comparisons, and analyses continued, each step refining the image of the animal. The name itself, derived from its size and southern origin, reflects both the physical presence of the creature and the place where it was found. Through this process, Giganotosaurus moved from obscurity into recognition, its existence revealed, not through a single event, but through a series of careful observations and decisions. The bones that once lay unnoticed within stone became part of a larger narrative connecting the present to a distant past. What remains today is both the physical record and the understanding built around it, a combination of material evidence and scientific interpretation. The discovery in Argentina did not simply uncover a skeleton, it opened a path into a world that had long since passed, allowing its presence to be known once more through the quiet persistence of those who sought to understand it. There are always spaces between what is found and what is understood, quiet gaps where certainty fades into careful interpretation. Giganotosaurus, though revealed through remarkable remains, still exists partly within these spaces, its full story shaped as much by absence as by what has been preserved. The skeleton uncovered in Patagonia offers a strong foundation, yet it is not complete. Certain bones are missing, others fragmented, leaving portions of the body open to reconstruction rather than direct observation. Even when most of the structure can be outlined, small uncertainties remain, subtle differences in proportion or alignment that influence how the animal is visualized. These gaps are not flaws in the record, but natural outcomes of time, where preservation is selective and incomplete. From these remains, much can be inferred about size, posture, and general form, but behavior leaves a lighter trace. Fossils preserve structure with clarity, yet they remain silent on movement beyond what bones can suggest. The way Giganotosaurus hunted, interacted, or responded to its surroundings cannot be observed directly, only approached through comparison and inference. Patterns seen in related species, combined with biomechanical analysis, provide possibilities rather than definitive answers. This creates a quiet tension within the study of such animals, where knowledge is grounded yet always provisional. One interpretation may suggest a certain style of movement or feeding, while another offers a different perspective, both shaped by the same underlying evidence. These variations do not contradict one another entirely, but reflect the range of possibilities that the available data allows. Debates continue within this space, not as conflicts, but as part of the ongoing process of refinement. New discoveries, even small fragments, can adjust existing models, adding detail or prompting reconsideration. Advances in technology also contribute, allowing researchers to examine internal structures or simulate motion in ways that were not previously possible. Each development brings the image of Giganotosaurus into slightly sharper focus, while still leaving room for uncertainty. Behavioral questions remain among the most open, whether it moved alone or in coordination with others, how it approached different types of prey, and how it navigated its environment across varying conditions are all subjects that resist definitive resolution. The fossil record offers hints, patterns that suggest certain tendencies, yet these hints stop short of complete clarity. Even aspects of growth and variation within the species are only partially understood. Differences between individuals, changes over the course of life, and the full extent of its range remain areas where evidence is limited. Each new find has the potential to expand this understanding, yet until such discoveries are made, the picture remains incomplete. These unknowns do not diminish the presence of Giganotosaurus, but rather frame it within the broader nature of scientific exploration. Knowledge builds gradually, shaped by what is available, and revised as new information emerges. The animal, as it is understood today, represents a balance between evidence and interpretation, a form reconstructed through careful study and thoughtful inference. In this way, Giganotosaurus continues to exist not only as a fossil, but as an evolving idea, one that shifts gently as understanding deepens. The gaps within its story remain open, not as limitations, but as quiet invitations for future discovery, where each new piece of evidence carries the potential to bring the past into clearer view. Reconstruction begins in fragments, small pieces of bone lifted from stone and carried into spaces where they can be studied with care. Each fragment holds shape and texture, subtle details that guide interpretation without speaking directly. From these remains, scientists begin to assemble a form, not by filling gaps with certainty, but by working within the boundaries of what the evidence allows. The process unfolds slowly. Bones are measured, their surfaces examined for signs of muscle, attachment, wear, and growth. The curvature of a rib, the angle of a joint, the thickness of a limb all contribute to understanding how the body once moved and functioned. These observations are not isolated, they connect, forming a framework where each piece supports the next. Through this, Giganotosaurus begins to take shape, not as a complete image at once, but as a structure that emerges gradually. Interpretation relies on comparison. Modern animals, though separated by immense spans of time, provide reference points that help bridge the unknown. Birds and reptiles, carrying traces of shared ancestry, offer insight into posture, muscle arrangement, and movement. By observing how living bodies operate, scientists can infer how similar structures may have functioned in the past. These comparisons are careful and measured, acknowledging both the similarities and the limits of direct analogy. From bone alone, behavior remains elusive, yet certain patterns can still be suggested. The arrangement of limbs indicates balance and stride. The shape of the skull hints at feeding strategies, and the placement of sensory structures suggests how the animal perceived its surroundings. Each inference builds upon the last, forming a picture that is both grounded and provisional, shaped by evidence but open to refinement. Technology extends this process further, allowing deeper exploration without altering the fossils themselves. Imaging techniques reveal internal structures, showing patterns of density and growth hidden within the bone. Digital models reconstruct missing portions, aligning fragments into complete forms that can be rotated, adjusted, and studied from every angle. These models do not replace the original remains, but enhance understanding, providing a way to test how the pieces fit together. Movement can also be explored through simulation. By applying principles of physics and biomechanics, scientists create models that estimate how Giganotosaurus may have walked, turned, or held its posture. These simulations rely on assumptions grounded in evidence, using known properties of muscle and bone to guide the process. The results are not exact recreations, but informed approximations that bring the static skeleton into motion. Throughout this work, uncertainty remains present, not as an obstacle, but as a guiding boundary. Each reconstruction is an interpretation shaped by current knowledge and open to change as new discoveries are made. A newly found bone, a revised measurement, or an improved method can adjust the entire structure, refining the image further. In this way, the past is not recovered fully formed, but carefully assembled, piece by piece. Giganotosaurus exists within this process, its presence reconstructed through the combined efforts of observation, comparison, and technology. What emerges is a balance between evidence and imagination, where each detail is anchored in what has been found, and each gap is approached with restraint. The result is not a perfect image, but a living understanding, one that continues to shift gently as knowledge grows, carrying the form of an ancient predator forward into the present with quiet precision. The word often arrives before the understanding, carrying with it a weight shaped by human experience rather than the quiet logic of the natural world. When applied to creatures like Giganotosaurus, it frames behavior through a lens that does not belong to the environment in which that behavior evolved. What appears harsh or violent from a distance is, within its own context, part of a continuous and necessary process. In nature, actions are not guided by intention in the way human language suggests. There is no sense of cruelty, no deliberate infliction of suffering for its own sake. Every movement, every interaction follows from the demands of survival, shaped by the need to obtain energy, avoid danger, and continue the lineage. Giganotosaurus, like all predators, operates within this framework, its behavior aligned with the requirements of its body and the structure of its ecosystem. The act of hunting, often described in terms that emphasize intensity, can be understood instead as a sequence of responses. The predator detects, approaches, and engages, each step guided by sensory input and physical capability. The outcome is not driven by emotion, but by the alignment of these factors at a particular moment. Success provides sustenance, failure requires adjustment, and the process repeats as part of an ongoing cycle. From a human perspective, it is easy to interpret these interactions as dramatic or extreme, yet within the environment they occur as part of a broader balance. Herbivores feed, predators hunt, and both exist within systems that regulate their numbers and distribution. This balance is not static, but constantly shifting, influenced by changes in climate, geography, and the availability of resources. Each species contributes to this dynamic, its behavior shaped by the pressures it encounters. Evolution plays a central role in guiding these behaviors over time. Traits that support survival and reproduction persist, while those that do not gradually fade. In Giganotosaurus, the structure of the body, the design of the teeth, and the coordination of movement all reflect adaptations that align with its role. These features are not expressions of aggression, but solutions developed through countless generations, each step refining the ability to function within its environment. The term savage simplifies this complexity, reducing a system of interactions to a single impression. It overlooks the precision and efficiency that define natural behavior, focusing instead on outcomes that appear stark when removed from their context. In doing so, it separates the observer from the system rather than placing the behavior within the continuous processes that sustain life. When viewed without this framing, Giganotosaurus becomes part of a larger pattern, one where each action contributes to the stability of the ecosystem. The predator does not exist apart from its surroundings, but as an integrated element within them, its presence influencing and being influenced by the forms around it. The same principles apply across time, shaping the behavior of species in ways that reflect the conditions they encounter. In this light, the idea of savagery dissolves into something quieter and more precise. What remains is a recognition of how life operates through necessity, guided by forces that extend beyond individual moments. Giganotosaurus moves within this framework, its actions neither harsh nor gentle, but simply aligned with the enduring patterns that shape the natural world. Across the long history of Earth, no single form holds its place forever. What appears dominant within one moment is only part of a larger rhythm where presence rises, settles, and gradually gives way to what follows. The idea of a single ruler fades when viewed across these spans, replaced by a sequence of forms, each shaped by the conditions of its time. Giganotosaurus exists within this sequence, not as an isolated figure, but as one expression of a pattern that has repeated many times. Its body, its behavior, and its role all reflect a world that supported its design. That world, with its own balance of life and environment, allowed it to emerge, to persist, and to move through its time with quiet certainty. In this way, it becomes part of something larger than itself, a moment within an ongoing process. Later, T-Rex appears, carrying a different structure, a different approach, yet occupying a similar position within its own environment. It does not begin the story of apex predators, but continues it, shaped by changes that occurred long before it arrived. Its presence reflects the same underlying forces, the interaction between environment, prey, and the gradual shaping of form through evolution. These transitions do not unfold with abrupt clarity. There is no single point where one era ends and another begins. Instead, change moves gently, guided by shifts in climate, geography, and the distribution of life. As these elements adjust, so too does the balance within ecosystems, allowing new forms to take shape while others recede. Within this continuity, dominance reveals itself as something temporary, not fixed. Each species that rises to prominence does so within a set of conditions that will eventually change. When those conditions shift, the traits that once provided advantage may no longer align in the same way. Over time, this leads to transformation, not through sudden replacement, but through gradual adjustment. Giganotosaurus, then, is not lost in a final sense, but remains present within the broader story of life. Its existence contributes to the patterns that continue to unfold, influencing how we understand the relationship between form, behavior, and environment. T. Rex follows within this pattern, not as a singular peak, but as another variation shaped by its own time. Looking across these moments, the Earth appears less like a stage for isolated figures and more like a continuous landscape of change. Each era introduces its own dominant forms, each adapted to the conditions they encounter, each part of a cycle that extends far beyond any individual species. The repetition is not exact, yet the structure remains, guiding the emergence of new expressions. In this quiet progression, there is a sense of continuity that connects distant times. The forms differ, the environments shift, yet the underlying processes remain consistent. Life responds, adapts, and moves forward, shaped by forces that operate across scales far larger than any single moment. As this story settles, it leaves behind a simple recognition that what appears permanent is always part of something that continues to change. And if these glimpses into the deep past feel like moments worth returning to, a small gesture of support helps keep them unfolding, allowing more of these quiet histories to be explored, one piece at a time.